All right, listeners, welcome to episode 6 of the Real Take Tennis podcast. This is three in a row for us. 3 consecutive weeks. We're almost as consistent as Novak's backhand right now.
I think we're gonna have to make this a weekly occurrence for real.
Yeah, we're gonna have to do that. Fortunately, it was funny. I was gonna try and figure out how to start this off with some stupid joke about how we're not actually talking about Wimbledon. We're gonna talk about the three tournaments that are happening this week: Gstaad, Bastad, and Newport. But then I was like, dude, you know what? I'm not even gonna try and like loop this in. But the fact that there's like clay court tournaments and one grass court tournament happening right now is just too funny to me.
We'll say it for the fifth time in a row, probably, but this sport is just an absolute grind. I mean, to be playing a challenger final instead of getting the chance to watch Wimbledon is pretty preposterous. And
It's
I also think that leads right away into the fact that I think we need to just maybe rip a few people anonymously who did not prioritize the Wimbledon final on Sunday.
Yeah, I mean it's completely understandable when it's 6 a.m. Like, sure, you're not gonna wait. Maybe you don't want to wake up at 6 a.m. I think that's completely fine. But like, yeah, guys, put your tea time to noon or later. You didn't have to do it at 10:30 or 11.
Brutal. Brutal. Right away, we're get given real takes.
Yeah, I mean, you know what? Like, why watch it? If you're gonna watch at the pro shop, you might as well just watch it home and go later. But this is only applies to a small subset of people, so they know who they are.
I was actually surprised, dude. I think a lot of people who play and watch tennis didn't prioritize this match, which I think it's interesting to me because maybe we were just spoiled and kind of took the last 20 years for granted. But I
Yeah,
think what people don't understand is that this may have been the best match that we will watch in the rest of our lives. This was a changing of the guards. This was Federer Sampras in '01. This was Nadal Federer in '09. You don't see this very often, and it doesn't matter if Carlos or Djokovic is your favorite player or not. These are the moments where favorite players are created. And so, I just it kind of bewilders me, to be honest with you.
yeah, it's actually really funny you mentioned that because I saw this awesome ad that Nike put out, and the quote. Did you read this quote? The quote was, don't just belong to an era, start your own one." And I was like, dude, they got the first of all, they got the marketing down. They know how to inspire, but I was like, even if you take away the fact the commercial aspect of that, that's a baller quote right there.
I mean, Nike is the company that has the copyright on the most important, in my opinion, phrase of all time, which is just do it.
Just
I
do it.
mean,
Yeah.
the whole motivation industry, which is a multi-billion dollar industry, can be summed up in those three words.
Yeah. You just got to figure out a way to do it. And the fact that this kid is 20 years old and redefining tennis history. I mean, this is just the start. So we don't want to jump too far ahead. I think let's maybe we can save the Carlos talk for a little bit because we have some stuff to talk about.
I'll say
But it's
one
just
thing about Nike
yeah,
too.
yeah.
Just I think the other two-word slogan I remember that I got to shout out is when they made that T-shirt for tennis players that said "I'm next." That was that
That's
was just
sick.
what you're talking about too, right?
Yeah.
Start your
Yeah.
own.
Yeah. No, I mean it's just like you can't on some level you can't be intimidated by the fact that four dudes have run the game for the past like 20 years, right? And
Exactly.
for a 20-year-old kid to be as mentally tough as he is and win at Wimbledon, I mean, it's funny because I was looking at clips of Hewitt when he won Wimbledon in '02, '03, and he was a kid then too. And it's remarkable that these guys are able to do it at this level so young.
I mean, personally, I don't even think I was fully or even partially conscious at 20,
Yeah.
let alone able to have the mental stability to win and physical ability to win seven five set matches in a row.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and honestly, I mean, we can talk about this later, but I don't know if this would is harder or worse or easier than his U.S. Open run because the U.S. Open run I think was physically incredibly demanding because he was playing. I mean, he played that long ass match with Yannick. He played another really tough match after that, and then he played a really tough match, or I mean, finals, whatever, right? But he had like really long matches. I felt he spent a lot more time on the court. But this one, I think, was like a little bit different because of the fact that he had to bounce back after the French Open and deal with that, and then bounce back to win Wimbledon. I don't want to spoil this by jumping in right now, but like, yeah, I mean, there's so
I,
much to dive
I'll
in
just
there.
respond and then we have to promise to
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
to start from chronologically.
yeah,
The only thing I'll say is he beat Djokovic at
yeah,
Djokovic's best.
yeah.
I disagree with the people who say that Djokovic didn't play his best. It was a breezy day on a grass court. That was the best possible tennis that could have been played on that day by anyone in the entire world, any
Yeah.
generation, hands down.
Oh my God. Yeah, no, 100%. And yeah, yeah. Oh God, I want to start diving into
Okay,
some of
just
the
respond one
keep.
more time.
No,
One.
no, no, no. I
Okay,
can't. I
all right.
can't. We'll save it because yeah, we should talk about the other stuff. But I guess like I mean overall, like the final was just a remarkable cap to such an incredible week, right? I mean the quarterfinals, semifinals were still really, really good matches. Maybe we'll start off with the quarterfinals, and Carlos versus Holger.
Let's do it. So, to be honest with you, I didn't watch a whole lot of this match, but I caught the highlights. And I think the main comment that I have, at least from the highlights, is do not serve and volley on the ad side to Carlos's backhand. He won the first set breaker against Holger Rune with the backhand, stretch backhand down the line, the same shot that he broke Holger in the second set to win, to go up 5-4 and serve for it. The same shot that he used to win the second set against Djokovic in a breaker. It's just it's becoming one of the best shots in the game.
It's actually really funny you mentioned that because one of the questions I was like tee up throughout the rest of this was what's the is which shot like is Carlos's forehand or backhand, is that the best shot in the game right now? And I actually think I think his forehand is the best shot in the game right now. I don't think there's anyone who has like if you have that forehand, you're a lethal weapon.
No question. No question. I just think that specific shot in that circumstance when he has a target to go to,
Yeah,
he can lace it. But you're right. I mean, the one, again, I've said one punch man power. That guy
yeah,
can just, I mean, and at the expense of saying one comment about the final, he
yeah.
has the ability. Djokovic said this after the match, and it was asked about how people compare Carlos to Roger Federer, Nadal, and Djokovic, and having elements of all three of their games. And Carlos has the ability to change his forehand as well mid-match, which I think is another thing that's underrated. He can be ripping flat balls, and then he will just suddenly throw in the 8 to 10 foot looper and just won't stop looping it to your backhand before just teeing off on a cross-court forehand. So, I mean, he has every shot in the book.
It's remarkable because I mean, it feels like he has that like he has a similar type of forehand to Federer, right? Like he has that semi-Western forehand where he's able to just like full extension rip through across the body so easily. And like, I'm not to an extent, I'm kind of curious what he strings his racket at because I feel like the power he's generating off the power and the acceleration he's generating with his racket is very, very different than other players. And so to an extent, I wonder if he strings it super low because he's able to get like ridiculous power.
I think you may be surprised. I wouldn't be surprised as well if it's in the 40s, but
Yeah.
I mean, you just got to take a look at this guy's legs for a
Yeah.
20-year-old and understand the kinetic chain that he's working with from the
Yeah.
energy from the ground is it's technically a flawless forehand.
Oh
I
yeah.
mean, he is completely rotating potentially 180 degrees
Yeah.
when he's teeing off, probably more than that, probably 270
Yep.
degrees when he's unloading on a forehand.
Yeah, no, I mean it. The more and more I was like watching his forehand throughout, it reminds me of the fact that the best type of tennis is like Federer style of tennis of being ultra aggressive, right? And when you're that ultra aggressive and you're on, I don't care who is on the other court, you're gonna have your chances to basically like rip through them and put so much pressure, and that's what creates opportunities.
Especially on a grass court. And we've said this before, when you have that ability, the strategy of tennis, we can talk all day about court positioning and spin and which side to go to, but the strategy becomes really simple. because you just execute your serve and you execute your second shot.
Shot, absolutely. This would have led really nicely into Carlos's next match against Medvedev, but we'll save that for later. Um, I guess the only other thing, or actually not the only other quarterfinal that we think might be relevant to talk about would be Medvedev and Eubanks, right? I mean, Eubanks with such a remarkable run, but he had his chances in that fourth set. He had his chances in the fourth set to be able to close it out, but Daniil was just way too good, and I think way too solid in that fourth set tiebreak.
Yeah, before I talk about the match, I
Yeah,
just want to say a couple things about Eubanks because I think he obviously we're trying to make the time allocation proportional to the importance here, but I got to call out Christopher Eubanks for one third African American to reach the quarters after Arthur Ashe and Malavai Washington. Insane. Shout out to Donald Young for coaching this dude and training him from the age of 12 and giving Eubanks something that Donald Young didn't have to show him the ropes, to show him how to train, to show him how to book a court. Um, you know, Eubanks said multiple times in the interviews it wouldn't have been if it weren't for these people who showed him the way, he wouldn't have been able to do it. I know we were talking about the Ultimate Tennis podcast that came out with Tiafo Eubanks and Ben Shelton talking for a solid hour. And one caveat there is I think Eubanks was a little bit unbearable with his inability to let Ben Shelton speak, and Shelton quipped a couple times that he needed to shut his trap. But both Eubanks and Tiafo cited people like Young and Dennis Kudla for kind of paving that way and showing them what was done. So I thought that was really cool. And then, of course, you know, the match itself was unbelievable. Probably, would you say maybe the second best match of the tournament, in terms of how interesting it was?
I would probably have said Rublev's Bublik or
Mm,
Murray
Murray
Tsitsipas.
Cici. Yep.
Yeah, I'd say those because my one complaint about Medvedev and Eubanks was especially in that fourth set, it felt like they were just trading service games, right? Like they
Right.
just kept holding, and I feel like the baseline type games are what I enjoy watching more. So I would say it was up there for sure, but not the second best.
Very true. Very true. And the fifth set kind of got away from Chris a little bit too, which I think was a bit of a damper. He definitely had chances in the fourth, like you said, but uh, Medvedev ran away with it. And also kind of the way both of these guys play, which is really fast, both in the points, but also between points,
Like, yeah.
makes it really tough to soak in the moment, I think, the way we watched with the other matches you mentioned, like Tsitsipas Murray.
100%. I think this feeds in kind of nicely to a topic that will come up later around the concept of momentum, right? And what to do when you feel the momentum shift. It's very difficult when you're in that moment to just, you know, it's more natural to just go with the flow and just let it kind of happen. But one of the things that a lot of the great players do, right, is they're so willing to just slow it down, get yourself, even if slowing down disrupts your rhythm a little bit, it'll also disrupt the other person's rhythm, which is incredibly valuable, right? Especially when they're on the roll.
Have you ever read Winning Ugly by Brad Gilbert?
Of course, the tennis Bible.
So there's a very important chapter, probably the most important, where he talks about turtle time
Turtle time.
used
Yvonne
by
Lendl.
Yvonne Lendl.
Yep.
And Lendl was a master at working the clock, right? This was
Yeah.
pre-shot clock. Lendl knew how to absolutely race through points when he was winning and then
Yeah.
slow the clock down to turtle time when he started feeling that momentum losing. And it could have been losing even 2 points in a row, right? At the end of the day, the returner plays to the pace of the serve. That's what's written in the law, unless the server exceeds 25 seconds. So use the time effectively and intelligently.
Yeah, I mean, one of the it's one of the things about being a server, especially when you have that when you've lost the momentum, is you can go back to basic points and basic strategies, right? Like the out wide to open up the court, and I think that's probably what I would love to hear what Eubanks thinks he could have done differently in that fifth set, but this is the type of experience that I think will help him in the future matches, right? Because he will get this type of chance again. He's
Yep.
too good, and these are the types now that he's on a roll. These are the types of matches he'll get a chance to play again.
and he played into Medvedev's speed, right? So you just saw that fifth set run away from him. But I want to call out again, like servers serve, man, right? So
Yep.
Eubanks, I mean, the second set and third set, I know Medvedev said that was, he lost it a little bit, but dude, I mean, Eubanks took the racket out of his hand. There's
Yeah.
nothing you can do when the guy is just slapping winners on the second or third shot.
Yeah. 100%. And that's why, like, I mean, it's literally what we were just talking about, right? About the type of aggressive tennis that bodes really well. When you play that aggressive and you're feeling the ball, there's nothing the other person can do, especially someone like Medvedev who is standing really far back and is trying to grind it out, even on grass a little bit.
Last thing about Eubanks here. I think the reason why he had so much success in this tournament as well, just wanted to shout out Donald Young as a lefty to show Eubanks that game style so early and get him exposed to the different spins and paces of a lefty. That's what allowed Eubanks to take out Cam Norrie in the fourth round, in the second round in four. That's what allowed Eubanks to beat Manarino in the finals before Wimbledon of a smaller tournament, right? So these are the types of intangibles. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if Eubanks is going to continue to dominate lefties going forward.
I would even hypothesize that one of the reasons that he is at the level he's at is probably because when he was playing with Donald so early on, there's no way Donald wasn't just targeting that one-handed backhand very early on. And so when you're doing that at a very early age, you know that that's what other people are going to do, and it makes your backhand that much better. And A, it makes your backhand that much better. B, it teaches you strategies for how to deal with that at an early age.
Right. And that's why he's so unfazed by the high backhand, right? I mean, he
Yeah.
he can just crack that harder, just as hard as the forehand.
Yeah. It also helps that he's like 6'7" and can like
Right. Right. Not a
swing
lot of
down
high
on.
backhands on a grass
Yeah,
court.
exactly. Swing down on the ball, but yeah, no, big time by Eubanks. Cool. I think the only other quarter that we wanted to talk about real quick was Rublev Djokovic. I mean, we were one of the things we did notice is that Djokovic does at the later stages of the tournament, Djokovic does tend to the first if he loses a set, the first set is what he tends to lose, and that could be for a variety of reasons, right? Maybe he doesn't come out as sharp. Maybe the other guy's playing. I actually thought Rublev played really well in that first set. And the only point I wanted to make here was that in the third set, one of the things that I thought that actually kept him in the game and even gave him a chance to break at 4-5 was the fact that even though Novak was targeting his backhand like really, really well, Rublev was just pushing it back into play. And I felt that Novak didn't really know what to do with that. And instead of just going back to his backhand, he tried to open up the court like a little more, right? But when he's going back to the forehand, Rublev's not afraid to tee off on it. And so that was made it really, really tough for Djokovic to hold that game. That was the only point I wanted to make on that game.
Yeah, sometimes throwing in the knuckleball and making your opponent generate their own pace can break and expose their game down, right? And I think it makes it even harder when you're playing a guy who literally each of his sides, kind of like Cam Norrie actually, is
Yeah.
like you're playing a different player, right? When you hit to
Right.
the
Yeah.
backhand, you're playing a different player than when you hit to the forehand. So uh yeah, I would echo that again. I think we mentioned that Rublev was the last person to bagel Djokovic, so we knew this was going to be an interesting match. We knew he was going to have the firepower to take a set, but I mean, at the end of the day, the complete game wins.
Yeah. Absolutely. I mean, massive shout out to Rublev for, I think, now reaching the quarterfinals at all four Grand Slams. So his game style is definitely working, but he needs to find out ways to be able to beat the best players at the biggest tournaments. And I think that's what his next phase is because he definitely seems to have taken a step mentally, which is great to see.
It is great to see, and I think that next step here for him is going to consist of just adding the variety to his game, right? I mean, he is a little bit stubborn about using the forehand as the primary weapon, but we're going to have to see him develop the net game the way Carlos has. We're going to have to see him add the drop shot. We're going to have to see him add more slices. And I think if he can execute on those things, I mean, the reality is Djokovic is 36. There's going to be a bit of a void, in the next 10, 15 years unless another Carlos appears out of thin air. So he will have chances.
Cool. Awesome. I think, yeah, now we can move on to semifinals. Let's start off maybe with Carlos Daniil. I know you have quite a few thoughts on this match, and I probably have the exact same, but I'll let you kick this one off.
Sure thing. I think we got to start with the obvious metaphor that Brad Gilbert used mid-match, which is Carlos versus Medvedev is like putting a 6'9" center in the post with a 6'3" guard. I mean, what I just don't understand is that there was a very interesting visual graphic that the ESPN crew put together, which was Medvedev's return stance on the first serve. He only hit five first serves within 5 feet of the baseline, only on the ad side, and the rest of the serves his contact point was 18 feet behind the baseline. He didn't try stepping in a single time on the deuce side. And this is where you got to wonder, like, I understand in the match on the court, it's really hard to step out of yourself and think about strategy, but there's coaching allowed. You're a smart guy. You're an intelligent guy with a high tennis IQ. How do you not try something new out or at least become aware that what you're doing isn't working? I mean, the stat for me was by 3-1 in the third set, Carlos had served and volleyed and won 17 out of 18 serve and volley points. That is just, I mean, unacceptable for a guy like Medvedev, who's actually a great returner. This is where, I put it in our group chat that I think that's actually the one stat that maybe you or me or someone from our level could actually tree on a second serve that Carlos hits and actually beat the 17 out of 18 stat.
Yeah, no, it's absolute. It's funny because when I was watching the match as well, it's just surprising that Medvedev has talked a lot about how he feels that he doesn't have the reaction time to be able to block the serve back when he's closer to the baseline. But it is surprising that like if it was working, I would have 100%, or like if it had worked at any point on Carlos, I wouldn't have minded him just standing far back on the baseline, right? But the fact that he wasn't able to like even get returns like in play and make stuff happen, I felt was like the major, like exactly what you said, right? Like the major issue. Like I would have at least, I don't know if it was in your okay, maybe here's a question. Do you think it's better for him to be on the baseline, and let's say he actually misses the returns, would that have been better than standing far back and getting the ball back in play, but getting the serve and but getting giving Carlos the easy volley?
It's a good question, and I'll answer with hindsight as 2020. But I
Yeah,
guarantee you, if he took a few cuts 5 feet within 5 feet of the baseline on the deuce side, he would have won more than 1 point out of 18. I mean, he literally gave Carlos the out wide slice on the deuce side. He just said, "Here, have it. You're gonna ace me every time."
yeah. And I think like it's exactly what you're saying in that he's too talented of a returner to not get a couple balls back in play. Like it may not have worked in the second set, but if you do it enough, you're gonna get chances throughout the match. You're too good to not be able to have like those types of chances.
Yeah, and I also think when a player is serving and volleying, the pressure to hit a good return is actually less, in my opinion. If you're able to target the right spots and keep the ball low, you may actually get great two-shot pass opportunities with your second shot.
Yeah, that's literally what I was gonna say. Like even if he's coming forward and you hit the return right at him, there's no way that first volley that Carlos was gonna hit was gonna be an outright winner, right? He was gonna put it in play deep into the corner and force and Medvedev would have another chance to like pass him, right? Because he's gonna get to those balls.
Exactly. And there are very specific tactics you can use when someone is serving and volleying in terms of where you want to put your return. So, for example, on the do side, if Carlos hits an out wide serve, if you're going to miss middle, you want to miss more cross middle than line middle because you do not want him to be able to hit a backhand cross court with an angle into the open court. You want him to have to hit a line shot that doesn't have as much angle on it. Similarly, on the ad side, same thing. When you're going wide, you want to miss more cross to force your opponent to go line. Um, but on the deuce, I mean, you can sorry, when your opponent serves up the middle, you can take cuts straight back at them, and again, take away angles and look for second shot passes.
Yep, 100%. And it's funny because I'm actually surprised that more people don't do this against Daniil. I feel like Carlos was this was the first time I had seen someone successfully do try and serve and volley against Daniil and if do it to the exact same success that Carlos had. I haven't seen a lot of people do that, and I'm surprised more people don't do it now.
Yeah, and I mean it's a similar strategy against other players, right, who stand really far behind the
Exactly.
baseline. I
Yep.
will I will kind of caveat Med's loss with the fact that number one, it was his first time playing on center court. So
No way.
he was playing on court one the whole time. So
Uh,
interestingly, I think he was not used to the slickness of the grass, and I
yeah.
think that made him even less confident in his reaction times. But I will say, reaction times are also something that he can work on.
Yeah.
If he doesn't feel confident in it, that's something you can drill out the same way a ping pong player becomes instinctual after training for 8 hours a day.
Yeah, and I would be surprised if if he returns from a couple feet beyond the baseline. I would be shocked if his backhand return isn't as good as I think it is. I think his backhand return is one of the best in the game. So it really feels to me like the only return he needs to work on in order to feel more confident stepping up is the forehand return, which is the tougher return for a lot of the guys who have bigger windups, right? I mean, Nick Kyrgios has talked about it himself. Like his forehand return was like the weaker return, and that was what everyone was targeting. And so I think there's ways to work on this, definitely.
Absolutely. And I think it also goes to the fact that he has kind of more of that extreme Western grip on his forehand, right? You can learn and practice forehand bunts with your more Eastern backhand grip, and learn how to just be effective. And especially on a grass court, you don't have to put spin on it. You can redirect the pace and still hit through the court and get some weight behind your shot.
Yeah, definitely. I it and the other minor comedic point I was gonna make is this isn't like doubles, right? Like where you need to have where there's a guy at the net who's gonna cut off those types of weak returns, right? Like he can get those, or he doesn't have to worry about someone else cutting it off. Like he can just get it back and play it deep and make something happen.
Yep. And I think just as equally interesting to Medvedev's return hit point on the first serve is probably Carlos's first volley hit contact point, right? I mean, to your point, not only are when you stand closer, are you kind of, at least taking away angles, but you're also taking away so much time where you're getting your opponent to hit their first volley behind the service line, probably at their feet, popping it up a little bit. I mean, I saw Carlos hitting balls on top of the net on a serve and volley, which is just, I mean, that's like kind of irresponsible.
Yeah, and it's exactly what you're talking about, right? Like when you take that when you're up closer at the baseline, you have to take that first volley in no man's land. That's a difficult volley for anyone to take, especially when it's coming with the type of pace that Medvedev can block back. Um, so stuff to work on, but I think this is the I was listening to what Daniil was saying in after the interview, and I think these are the types of matches that definitely he enjoys trying to figure out how to solve these problems, right? And I would be shocked if he doesn't come back the next time with a different strategy against Carlos because he's highly motivated.
Yep, he's a problem solver. He's an octopus. He seems a little bit less stubborn than a Rublev, and I'm sure that he will use his game and adapt. The only other thing I would call out was unrelated to his return game was actually his second serve uh, points won. I think it was 8 out of 25 by 2-3 in the third, so it's landed somewhere around 30%.
Yeah,
This is for one of the guys with one of the best second serve points
sure.
won in the game, and great use of variety in using kind of the first serve as a second serve too. So, I mean, it's tough to kind of peel back what's the reason for it, but I think we have to give credit to Carlos as well for just executing phenomenal returns.
Yeah, and one of the things you'll probably notice on the second serve is Carlos is stepping up very he's not afraid to hit the forehand off the second serve return, but he's putting so much pressure off the jump. And I think that's definitely the reason why Medvedev struggled so much to win second serve returns because Carlos is just putting so much pressure on him.
And this is where the classic semi-Western forehand grip comes into play on the return,
Oh,
right? He has no
yeah.
fear in standing inside the baseline and having to switch grips. He's just hitting through it no matter what.
Yeah, the perks of A being young, where you have the energy to basically move your feet around a lot, but also B just the raw talent in terms of footwork and ability to move around the court.
And fast
The guy
twitch muscle fibers.
fast switch muscle fibers. The guy's just a flat out athlete. Cool. Awesome. I think that leads us to the other side, Yannick and Djokovic in the other semifinal. I will say I was very impressed with I was listening to what Yannick was saying after the fact, and he thought that he had a better chance this time to beat Djokovic, even though it was in straight sets, because the last when he played him last year, the final three sets were he didn't have any chances in every single set. He felt like he had break point chances and he had set point opportunities in that final third set, right? And so definitely I think a better performance for him this time around.
I will say the fact that he thinks a three-set win from Joker is his best opportunity to beat him tells you how big the level gap is. Um, the
Definitely.
stat for me that sticks out is Sinner is 0 and 8 against the top five. Um, I just again, the guy is so talented. He is going to have chances. He is going to win slams, but just like kind of Rublev, right? He has to figure out that last step. And to me, it's I know you're super bullish on him, and I think he has all the tools in the toolkit. I almost think he wants it too much and wants is focusing on looking good while he's doing it, as opposed to winning gritty matches with gritty tennis. I think that this is, I'll pose this question to you, which is, do you think that he was so good at his level and he dominated the field at every level that he's played at, where he's never really had to win gritty matches because he just almost doesn't seem to have that element that Djokovic has of like of grind and ability to like, okay, I'm gonna hit a short, I'm gonna shank a little bit, but I'm still gonna win this point. And I
This is
think
a
more even broad more broadly, right? Like for parents who are putting their kids in tournaments, what is the timing for having your kids struggle and leveling them up when they're dominating a field versus just letting them learn how to be the big fish in the small pond and constantly dominate?
it's yeah, this is analogous to something we see in like basketball, right? Where like Ben Simmons, for example, he's 6'10", maybe what, 240 pounds, like an athletic specimen. He's been that way since he was in high school, right? And so only knew how to play one way. That's in transition, that's dunking on everybody because he was just so much bigger than everyone. And now fast forward like 7, 8 years later, he's the exact same player as where he was in high school, right? Because he hasn't developed any other like aspects. And I think that's like slightly similar to what you're talking about here. I will say I have seen minor improvements
Yep.
on very specific things from Yannick over and over again. The stat that I wanted to call out actually was prior to the Djokovic match, Yannick, 40% of Yannick's serves came back unreturned. And I
Wow.
think that speaks to the level that speaks to something we were talking about in the last podcast, right? Where like I personally think like that shift from platform to pinpoint or yeah, platform to pinpoint on his service motion is helping him uh, feel more confident and comfortable to serve because it looks like he's putting more pace behind the ball. And I think that he's more willing to make those types of adjustments. And I think it's only a matter of time with Darren in his box as well, right? That he learns how to figure out these like type of gritty matches because Darren's worked with everyone. He knows
Right.
how to find ways to push his guys to dig deep and find answers, right? And so I think it's a matter of time.
Yeah, and I think to your point about the serving improvements, the serve that goes kind of under the radar with the change from platform to pinpoint is actually the second serve. I think the first serve, you're obviously going to have more momentum popping it, but the second serve, if you add 5 miles an hour on your second serve and you're able to kick or slide at body, I mean, you're getting free points and you're shocking your opponent with handcuffing serves. So I would be curious to know what the improvement is on that front too.
Yep, something to for sure take a look at as he moves on to the next couple of tournaments.
Yeah, a couple more points on Yannick Djokovic that I wanted to mention was I think the first goes back to the comment I made about how I think Yannick kind of prioritizes looking good over maybe performance a tad. And what I noticed is he's sliding a lot and probably more than Djokovic. On the contrary, when Djokovic was asked in a press conference, how do you slide on grass? Djokovic actually said this is the least he's ever slid in his career, and this is the best he's ever moved. So it's almost like they're taking two separate trajectories, and Yannick is kind of focusing on, maybe a type of movement that obviously the game is adapting so fast that it's already outdated to slide on grass. Djokovic is figuring out a way to move better without doing so on most points. Um, another comment that I would make is that this is credit to Djokovic. I believe at 4-5, 15, 40 in the third, someone distracted him between his first and second serve. He ended up holding that game, and then he turned to that dude and made a crying face. Just a little sob face. And he started doing that a little bit more. And honestly, man, it gets me hyped. Like I love that shit. I think um, you know, the people who are trying to disrespect him and distract him, they get what they deserve.
It's absolutely shock. It's so shocking to me because I still think at the end of the day, the guy doesn't get the respect he deserves.
He doesn't.
He's not looked at the same way Federer and no and Rafa are. And this is the type of stuff that you see happen for him to him all the time, no matter who like he could be playing against, someone who's good and the crowd will be on that guy's side instead of Novak's. Like I find that Novak doesn't get the crowd support that he gets that he should get, right? And this is the type of like kind of antics that I think I see happening a lot.
Why do you think that is?
Oh my God. I think that the core reason about that is because it's stuff like the vaccination issue. He has like controversial takes on things that he believes in. And I mean, vaccine A, B, I think stuff like the water, like he believes like water has like healing powers, and even if you like even if you with the power of prayer you can turn like toxic water into healing water, right? So he has like anti-scientific, he has very like contrarian takes that I'm sure he believes, right? But they focus on that instead of the tennis and what he's achieved. Because if you look at it like objectively, like sure, when he was a kid, he used to retire like in kind of non-adverse conditions. He used to like, wuss out a little bit. But I think he's an incredibly charismatic figure. He has never done anything to like kind of disrespect the game of tennis. Like I know people are gonna talk shit about the fact that he like accidentally hit that ball, like the ball at the lineswoman. I mean, that's I think like a minor issue in my opinion. And I think it's like little antics like that that add up that make people dislike him. Because I was watching like some people interview, like this guy interview fans at Wimbledon, and they were just saying like, why don't you like, do you think Novak's gonna win this year? And he's like, I hope he doesn't, but like, I think he will. And I think to me at least, I think those types of little antics are the reason why. What do you
And
think?
it's weird because I fall into that camp as well a little bit, right? Where I almost have had to self-reflect on like why I don't, it's not even about liking or disliking, like why I don't see him, or it took me so long to accept that he is the GOAT. And, I think you hit the nail on the head with a lot of little things. I have a bit of a controversial take. I almost wonder if he likes it and he wants it and he brings it upon himself because we've mentioned this that he plays better when he does things like that. He's a bit of a McEnroe in that standpoint. When he gets emotional, when he gets a little angry, he can step up and become more dangerous like a caged or injured animal. But, I think the reason might, in my opinion, might be even simpler. I think it's just the fact that he was a little bit late to the party and he just shat on Federer's and Nadal's rivalry. And, I know some people like threesomes, but there's nothing like direct eye contact with one person. And I think the Federer and Nadal rivalry, he kind of just stepped in there and it's also the way that he did it, right? I mean, Chris Fowler had a phenomenal quote, and respect to this guy who's not really a tennis player, but has learn the commentary game so expertly. He had a phenomenal quote at the very end of the Carlos Alcaraz Djokovic final, which is, in this sport, the crown is not handed over, it is ripped away. And that's exactly what Djokovic did in 2011 when he won 7 consecutive matches against Rafael Nadal, right? I mean,
Yeah.
he just ripped away what Federer and Nadal had and really dominated like no other. I mean, if you count the World Tour finals in there, you count the Masters 1000s, this is a guy, you count the fact that he's been robbed of slams. I mean, his lead is a lot bigger than it
Actually
is
is.
reflected right now.
Yeah, I think I'm reminded of I'm on relation in relation to your point. I'm reminded of like uh something Nick said, and he's like, I don't think we'll ever see like these three types of players again. I don't think we'll ever see someone wield a racket as effortlessly as Roger did, and that's what endeared him to like so many fans, right? I don't think we'll see someone who fights and is so tenacious like Rafa and at for every single point, every single ball. And I don't think we've seen someone who just wins like Novak, right? Like
Exactly.
he didn't say there's nothing about Novak's game that necessarily appeals to maybe like a casual tennis fan, right?
Right.
But it's the elegance of Federer and how like beautiful he looks when he plays tennis and how effortless he makes it seem and how hard Rafa fights for every point. Novak doesn't necessarily have that to the casual viewer, right? And I think that's like it's because he came late to the party that he's not
It,
looked
it,
at the same way.
yeah, it's a phenomenal point because I feel like our personalities are such that we are fairly binary creatures.
Yeah,
And Djokovic doesn't really fall into either camp. He just falls into the Holy Spirit camp, right? Not father son. He falls into the camp of just winning. Um, for I mean, just being better at everything, right? Than his opponents.
yeah, and it's funny because like I mean, you and I will obviously appreciate his wall-like defense, his backhand down the line, his mental game, the commitment he has to the game. But that's not what the casual, I think, person or the diehard Fed diehard Rafa will appreciate as much. And I think it's unfortunate because I think he's the type of person who's going to be remembered and appreciated after he retires than when when he's actually playing.
Yeah, I mean, for sure, when you think about it, like you said, objectively, right? This is a guy who had asthma, who had inflammation, who had injuries, and he fixed all of that stuff with diet, with whether it's placebo or not, with just pure work and experimentation. And, that's the type of stuff that a lot of people should theoretically respect, but somehow, it gets overlooked by some of these other things. And I think even charisma wise, for whatever reason, he doesn't get the credit he deserves. I mean, I would urge anyone who hasn't seen the recent video of him in the golf cart on the way to a practice, saying, "Can I get a hiya?" Just like, I mean, this dude was loose. I don't know how
Yeah.
you can. That made me gain so much respect for the guy. He's hilarious.
Yeah, I think he's just open to give the fans like an inside look into some of what he does, right? And like I mean, we talked when we got on about the fact that like there's tournaments happening like this week. The U.S. Open swing is or the American swing is happening not that far away. It's happening in like 2 weeks or 3 weeks. Like Montreal and Toronto and Cincinnati are only happening a couple of weeks from now. So he's still like he's devoted his whole life and his whole like everything to tennis, right? And I think that's not appreciated as much because it's not easy to do this year in year out and win as much as he has, and I it's unfortunate.
And even going out of order here, but the post match interview in the finals,
Yeah.
right, where he shows that emotion as he's talking, as
Oh
he's
yeah.
looking at his family after he loses. You can tell he wanted that so badly
Yeah.
for his son, who's just kind of starting to probably have his first memories.
Yeah.
And that's the type of stuff that this guy is still a human. I don't think he deserves to be disrespected.
Yeah, no, for sure. And it's also really good perspective from him to be like at the end of the day, I've won so many matches at Wimbledon. I've won matches that I shouldn't have won. I've had like a really good career. You can't be selfish about the fact that like I lost in a 5-set match to an extremely good player, right? He didn't lose to some bum. Like he lost to a really good player. And I think that's remarkable humility from him.
Yeah, the wisdom after that type of a roller coaster to be able to
Yeah,
come up with that response and have the gratitude
yeah,
and center yourself on that is
yeah.
pretty impressive.
Yeah, he's goated for a reason. Awesome. I think maybe let's dive into to what we've been waiting for.
Absolutely. This is the moment I've been waiting for a long time.
Yeah, I think this is great. Maybe like I mean we can just dive into like something and shift around. I actually want to start off with I think for how I'm sure Novak would probably agree that he didn't necessarily play like his absolute best, but it's like literally what you're talking about at the start. Like I don't think anyone else could have, besides Carlos, could have played as good as Novak did in those conditions. But in my opinion, this match came down. Novak's opportunity to win came down to 2 or 3 points, and
Yep.
those are the two points in the tiebreaker,
Yep.
that set point and the 6-all point, and that swinging volley
Oh my
at
goodness.
0-1 at out in the fifth set. The first two I found extremely surprising because
Yep.
those were routine backhands right in the middle of the court. I literally have the screen open right here and I'm watching like the position of the court. It's basic backhands in the middle of the court that he missed, which is just so uncharacteristic of him. Especially more so that the point before to set up that set point for Novak passed Carlos with the backhand passing shot. So it's not like his backhand was out of form. It's just so unfortunate that those 2 points he flubbed backhands, right? And then the third point that I was referencing, which was that swinging volley on the singles line, on the ad sides or due side singles line. I actually think he thought that as the ball was going in the air that it might be going out. And so he originally was going to smash it, but then changed it to a swinging volley. But it looked like the ball was behind him, and he tried to go behind Carlos on the high part of the net, and that's just such a tough ball. I would have loved to seen him like let the ball bounce and then go cross quarter down, like then make a play, right? Because that was such a tough ball, and it never occurred to me as he missed that ball. Like I thought he would have chances. I thought he would be able to like break him back, and it's just that those 3 points I think made all the difference.
Yeah, and this is a great place to start because
Yeah,
I think what happens when you watch a match like that is you focus on those 3 points that Djokovic made uncharacteristic errors on in big moments. There were almost 200, each player almost won 200 points in this match, right? That to make three uncharacteristic errors, I still think overall Djokovic played a phenomenal match. I agree with you. The first two backhands were uncharacteristic. I think, to be honest with you, the swinging volley was actually a taste of Djokovic's own medicine. That was the point of the match where Djokovic fell mid rally, still whips a forehand cross court, rips another couple backhands cross court, has the swinging volley, and Carlos just with some of the most phenomenal defense I've seen, right? Sliding into the backhand lob, throwing it up, knowing the wind's going to curl it around. We can nitpick the technicality of the forehand and how it got behind him and all of that stuff. And the fact that he maybe in hindsight could have reset the point with the forehand. But I mean, Djokovic also said that out of the corner of his eye, he saw Carlos sprint over to the backhand side and cover that and put a little extra pressure on him. So, I mean, at the end of the day, I still think it was a 50-50 point. And you know, that ball was going to land on basically within a 2x2 box next to the baseline and the sideline. So it's tough to say that that was an easy shot.
Oh, I 100% think it was. Yeah, I don't think it was an easy shot, and I actually think had he let the ball bounce, it actually opens it up to even like it actually makes it tougher for him because the that ball has nothing on it. For him to generate like a lot of pace off like a high of a bounce ball that's gonna bounce, that's gonna slow down, bounce up, for him to go cross court on that right into Carlos's forehand, he's
Yep.
going to have to hit a really, really good forehand in order to
Yep.
do that, right? That almost means that the line is like kind of the only like the better shot, but that's even tougher because, or that might be just as tough because now Carlos has the whole backhand cross court wide open, right?
Right.
So either way, it's an extremely tough choice. And I understand, right? Like take some time away from Carlos by hitting it out of the air, sure. But yeah, I 100% agree that we can debate this all we want, but we trust Djokovic to make the right decision there, and
Yep.
it's just unfortunate that he missed it at that point.
Now, it's what happened after that got obviously the casual tennis fans rattled for whatever reason, even though it was unimportant, which was Djokovic just absolutely annihilating his racket on the net court. He got the largest fine of the year,
Yeah,
$8,000, which honestly is not that much considering it'll probably cost $8,000 to replace that wooden Wimbledon center court net cord,
yeah,
or net post.
yeah.
But, I mean, I think, he was asked twice about this in the press conference, and he was like, there's nothing to be said. And I agree with him. He's
Yeah.
showing emotion. He gets broken in the fifth set at Wimbledon. He knows that was a gimme, or, he's thinking that was a gimme in his mind. There's, I don't think it's that deep.
This annoys me so much because this idea of tennis being the sport that's played in a monastery is so annoying to me. I mean, because we've played, we know how like violent to an extent this game is, right? Both physically and like mentally. And for him to like he just broke a racket and moved on his way, right? I actually really think that unless you're constantly losing it point in, point out, these minor infractions should be like completely fine in tennis. Like sure, breaking rackets. Like I actually really like what Rafa does here, and it's just like, yeah, I know someone who's less fortunate might actually want like they don't have access to the rackets that I do, right? And so I don't want to break a racket, and I actually really like that approach. But to not be allowed to like just let it out every once in a while, especially when it's that close, I think that's just like tennis. The ATP needs to like soften their stance on them, and there needs to be some type of like leeway there. And this actually leads to another thing that I saw about Novak. I saw Fergus Murphy, the umpire, give start the clock really early on Novak, and Novak is like, "Dude, I have to like walk all the way across. I'm not going over on every single point. You got to show a little bit of discretion there, right? And start the clock like little bit later. Now, if Fergus is giving Novak special treatment, that's one thing. But I think in this type of situation, they need to like the umpire needs to just be a little chill, right? And you don't have to do that to him.
Yeah, especially the way each point is going to and how gruesome they are. I mean, for Fergus to call a time violation in the second set breaker in the situation that it was called, I think it was a second set breaker, right?
Yes.
Yeah, I think that's a situation where I get what he's trying to do, right? Clearly, Djokovic had gotten close several times, and he needs to send a message. But I do wonder, again, hindsight's 2020, and I think Fergus did a great job of officiating, and he's one of the best in the world. But that situation, it's just like, oh, I wish he had probably given him the violation in a different situation earlier in the match or later in the match when it didn't seem like he's just inserting himself randomly.
Yeah. And I know you probably saw the exact same tweet I did of Nick calling Fergus a potato and saying he's one of the worst in the business.
I will call out Nick though, for saying that Berrettini was the favorite against Carlos and then deleting his tweet after he said
Ooh.
Berrettini won the first set. And he was like, oh, well, looks like I'm right. And he deleted that tweet. So gotta call our boy out for a little Twitter fail there.
Nick, mate, come on. That's completely fine. Stand up for what you believe in. You don't have just because people are gonna flame you slash you're wrong, you don't have to do that. That's actually really funny. I didn't know he deleted the tweet. That's
I think he
hilarious.
did.
Um, awesome. I think speaking on that point of Novak breaking the racket, I actually thought there was a chance that he might have hurt his wrist because he was flexing his wrist quite a bit right after he broke his racket, and I thought there was a chance that he might have hurt it because of that. He ended up, I mean, obviously he ended up being fine, and it looked like no one asked in the press conference, like no one asked him about it, so I think he was fine. But can you imagine like if he like hurts his wrist after he smashes his racket, what that would have looked like? That would have
So
been
so I
such
have
a
a funny story about
yeah
my personal life
yeah
relating to this, which is at CMU in college, I remember I was watching dubs, and I think it was the last match on, and I remember like jumping up and being super pumped after our boys won a point in the breaker, and I landed and sprained my ankle
No way.
right before my. It was the most embarrassing thing of my entire life. Um, and I mean, obviously, if Djokovic had hurt his wrist, that would be like a different magnitude of embarrassment.
Yeah.
Um, I think I'll just I think he let go of the racket, but I could definitely if you're saying you saw him kind of flex it,
Yeah.
then maybe it was hurting a little bit. He also did slip, and I think there were some questions mid-match about how badly he hurt himself there. I think at the end of the day, he's still the adrenaline clearly was pumping, and I think he
Yeah.
overcame those small issues.
Yeah. 100%. I think like he was able to he found a way to he's at the end of the day he still had his chances, right? And that's both the good part of this match and the part that that Novak will probably remember the most going into the US Open. I do you want to jump maybe real quick to Carlos and the mental kind of fortitude that he displayed in order to come back, or do you want to start off with? Do you have anything else you
Let's
wanted to?
let's talk about Carlos.
Okay.
And I think the one of the questions that was repeated multiple times in the press conference was, what did you change between the French Open and Wimbledon finals? And, and Carlos's answer was very interesting because he said, I am a different person from then. And that was 3 weeks ago, right? So this guy has literally convinced himself or became for real a different person. And I believe it. I think one of the things that obviously he's not going to reveal his tactics. He did crush a pickle juice, which was caught on camera. So the preparation was a little bit different, right? He knows now how to handle the cramps and overcome them physically and chemically. But what he did mentally was also very interesting. He wasted far less energy between points than he did in the French Open, and he relaxed himself between points and allowed himself to focus on just the 5 to 10 seconds where he needed to explode every 25 seconds. Even when he won that titanic 3-1 game in the third to get the double break, it was a quick expulsion of emotion and it was right on to the next thing. And I think in the French Open, he was too uptight. You know, the theory that you got to be moving your feet and showing your opponent that you have energy between points. I think that's a load of, baloney.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a myth. If you really are that much more fit, then maybe it sends a bit of a mental edge. But at the end of the day, you're just wasting energy.
I never, you know the player who used to do this all the time, David Ferrer. He used to bounce in the deep in the fifth set. I always used to see him bouncing up and down when he used to receive, and I was like, how the hell do you have the energy to do this? There's no way this can actually be like contributing. This is pure. This is either like what you're doing to stay in rhythm, or it's an intimidation tactic because I feel like you're just wasting energy here.
Yeah, maybe for Ferrer, it might have been a bit of an exception just because that dude has like watermelons for calves.
Apps, yeah.
Um, but for everyone else, if you don't look like Ferrer, then I would say don't waste your energy between points.
100%. On your point of like the mental, I actually want to go even further back to like what I think Carlos's attitude was prior to joining the match. There was a quote where Carlos was saying before this match, I thought I can't beat Novak. And I think that combined with the fact that he lost the first set loosened Carlos just a little bit to be like, okay, you know what? I'm and before the match I thought I couldn't beat him. I got smoked in the first set. Fuck it. Let me just go for my shots and see what happens. And I think that might have loosened him up a little bit because he broke right back in that second. He broke in that second set to go up. And I think that second set was the turning point in the match.
100%. I mean, Djokovic was locked from the first point. I mean, I think one of the highlights, the first highlight in the extended highlights video, I shout out ESPN Deportes for being the first folks to get out a 15-minute extended highlight video,
Yeah,
but was at love 15 in the first set or 15 love, and Djokovic just hits an insane angle forehand
yeah,
cross court, like basically from the middle of the court, he was seeing the ball like, you know,
A
like a
watermelon.
watermelon
Yeah.
from the first point. And I 100% agree with you. This was a match where even I will say Carlos still played pretty well in the first. It was just a match where every point had that significance of the weight of tennis history on it. Wimbledon being a tournament that was founded in 1877. It just felt like even a 15 love point is like, well, if you don't win this next point, or if you win this next point, you go up 30 love. Like you
Yeah.
separate. Every other point had that weight that I haven't really seen before, and it's just a function of also the level that they're playing at, where even those slight 2 point leads are momentum shifters.
100%. And to me, this is the most important, this is the most impressive thing about Carlos, the fact that he has this like mental level of composure to both have the confidence in himself to go for those shots at those moments, but also not get disturbed when Novak is playing at the level he is. Right. I think one of the things that I was really interesting in his press conference was like, I grew up a lot after French Open. And it's literally exactly what you're saying, right? It's like, dude, that was only 3 weeks ago. Like how this transformation of, being tight and cramping in the semifinals to being able to handle playing against the best one of the top or the second best grass court player of all time. I I just don't understand. I would love to know how Juan Carlos Ferrero gets him ready.
I'm glad you mentioned that name because that was the
Yeah,
first thought that came to my mind is I think, we've talked a lot about Carlos and ultimately the man in the arena is the man whose
yeah,
blood, sweat, and tears matter. But Juan Carlos Ferrero, I think, is a model of morality and virtue and guidance behind Carlos Alcaraz. This is a 20-year-old who could easily go down with a different group around him, go down a dark path and misuse his talent. But he just seems so laser focused on the mission and the task at hand. I haven't. I mean, it's really like Nadal, or Kobe, right? There are very
yeah,
few people in history who at that age have the maturity to not even want to splurge a little bit. I mean, I feel
yeah.
like he has not made any real off-court mistakes beyond his Calvin Klein photo shoot. Um, that, that was
Yeah,
maybe a low light of the last few years.
yeah, but when you're getting paid several $100, $100,000 to do that, we'll forgive Carlos for that. But it's exactly what you're saying, right? Like this, yeah, it's very Spanish to do what he's doing, right? Like just like work ethic, that blue collar attitude of like I'm gonna fight for every single point. I'm going to prepare the like exact right way before after matches. And to me, what's even more impressive is he's already won a Grand Slam. He can retire right now. He could have retired right after he won the US Open, and he can be a Hall of Famer, right? But that level of focus to be like, I'm still not done with my career. I still have much more to achieve. It's not easy. I mean, Nick himself has said it, right? If I won Wimbledon, it's the pinnacle of tennis. What more do I have to do? I'm retiring, right? And this kid is 20 years old. He's got I mean, he's already achieved pretty much everything that he needs to achieve in tennis, and he's dialed in. And I think that you're 100% right that it's credit to Juan Carlos Ferrero for being in his camp and a guy who's been world number one and had so much success on the pro tour. But it's also credit to Carlos for listening to Juan
Yep.
Carlos Ferrero because that's a rare. I mean, you and I have both been 15 and 16-year-olds, and when our parents give us advice, some of which may have been right, some of which may have been wrong, we just ignored it, right? And this guy's been locked in.
Yep, 100%.
Awesome. I think that was the spiel we had on both Novak and Carlos. What are some things in the match you think caught your eye? In one of the things I want to start off with is I thought one of the things that Carlos did really, really well was use his forehand to open up, to target Novak's backhand and open up the forehand side of the court. I thought Novak actually struggled a little bit when he was on the run on to the forehand side. And I was actually a little bit surprised by that. And I think one of the reasons that's probably the case is because of it's like what we were talking about, right? Like the sheer amount of power behind Carlos's ball is extremely tough for Novak to be able to time, especially on the grass court. You saw both players actually mention it, like motioning to the grass about the bounces and what was happening. And I wonder if that had a part to play in it. But that was one of the strategies that I thought Carlos did really, really well.
Yeah, I to be honest with you, I really didn't pick up anything too specific like you did
Yeah,
tactically. I just thought they're both such complete players that whichever side you're targeting, whichever strategy you're using,
yeah,
I mean they're gonna find a way to counter it. The main kind of tactical things that I was noticing were more kind of return position and first shot direction. It kind of goes back to what we were talking about with serving and volleying and the targets that you need to hit. I thought they both did a phenomenal job of when they miss their target off an out wide serve return, they're missing more cross court middle than line middle a lot of times,
yeah.
and just preventing their opponent from having an open court. And I think that's why I notice less things tactically because they are so good at preventing the 1-2 punch with shots like that, right? That get them in rallies and create a lot of 50-50 situations, regardless of whether you're serving or returning.
Yeah, 100%. And I think because of how complete both of their games are, it's tough for to be able to identify or have like a crystal clear strategy. It's more of can you keep whoever makes the right play at the right moment is going to be the winner of the match. The only thing I will say is that in the third set, I thought Novak served horrendously.
Yeah.
I was actually surprised to see that his first serve percentage was like 65% or something like that in the third set. It felt like it was significantly worse, but he won only 42% of those first serves. And I think I mean, that's why that set was like the absolute worst of the match. That was the only other tactical thing that I saw.
Yeah. I'll,
Really, really poorly.
sorry, go ahead.
No, go for it. That was it. That
I,
was it.
I was just gonna say one more thing. This is gonna be a minor comment, and I
Yeah,
know that we just said the match was won potentially on 3 points,
yeah,
but I will say the biggest delta between Carlos and Djokovic's game is the backhand slice.
yeah,
It's a small part of the game, but Carlos's backhand slice on a grass court is absolutely filthy. I mean, he's one of those guys who knifes it the way, and we said, right? He's an amalgamation of Federer, Nadal, and Djokovic, and he has a Federer-like slice where I have actually been a bit surprised with Djokovic's grip on his backhand, where he kind of has a very distinct two-handed backhand where both hands work separately as opposed to together. Carlos has kind of the opposite backhand where his hands work together very well. I've been surprised that more people don't chip to Novak's backhand because I think his low backhand is, of course, right. I'm picking at
yeah,
straws here, but I
yeah.
think it's the weakest shot in his game. I think he's going to be more prone to errors on it. He doesn't come. I mean, obviously he hits crazy shots of it off that shot, but I still think it's a little bit shakier than one might think.
It's funny you mentioned that because this is something that a reporter asked Federer is like, are you surprised at how well Novak handled your chip slice on the or slice backhand on in the 2019 final? And Roger was like, no, I mean, I was 100% trying to like chip more to his backhand side, but he's proven that he can like handle it. And I agree, right? Like we're trying to find like some nuance of ways of what, Carlos might have been thinking of from a strategic standpoint. But it is I have noticed the exact same thing that it seems like a lot of guys like there has been like some level of success when you like chip it. And that has been a little challenging. That's been a little interesting to see.
And maybe when we think of that kind of the standoff, the Mexican standoff between Nadal, Federer, and Djokovic, and the transitive property going on here, right? Where Djokovic seemed to dominate Nadal, but Nadal would dominate Federer, but Federer would dominate Djokovic. Maybe this is part of the reason why Federer had more of a winning record or seemed to struggle less against Djokovic than some of the other guys.
Yeah, and it's like the concept we were talking about at the start, where the best type of tennis is the aggressive tennis, right? And when Federer, when those types of players, Federer or Carlos, are playing when they're timing the ball and they're able to flatten out the ball as well as they can and have that level of pace beyond the ball. There's very little anyone else can do to get to win the match. So that's a tough one.
Yep.
Awesome. I think there that was those are the key points that I think we wanted to cover on the match overall. I think it's unfortunate because we both thought Novak was going to win this tournament, and that would have made the storylines going into the U.S. Open absolutely incredible for a chance to get the calendar Grand Slam in this year. And so it's unfortunate, but I think this does open up a really nice storyline of Carlos trying to defend his title against Novak because if I'm Novak, yeah, maybe I'm a little discouraged that I lost this, but the level is right there, right? And it came down to a couple points and Carlos playing as well as he did in order to win, right? So if I'm Novak, I'm not discouraged, but I'm like highly motivated to try and make something happen at the U.S. Open. And I still think, even though Carlos has won Wimbledon and is a defending champion, I'll still give the edge to Novak because we talk about Medvedev being a great problem solver. I don't think Novak and Goran they'll be right on top of it.
Yeah, that's a difficult duo to beat. Um, I do want to mention a couple more things. I think we talked a lot about what happened
Yeah.
in those 5 hours within the match, except for, of course, the 3-1 game where, I think that was a microcosm of the
Oh
whole
yeah.
match. It was the battle within the war, as another Chris
Yeah.
Fowler quote, right? Where, 13 deuce game, 26 minutes, tied for second longest game
Yeah.
all time.
Yeah.
Uh, that's one of those like momentum shifters in a match that's just
Yeah.
glaring us in the face. And for
Yeah.
Carlos to pull through that match was, or that game and get the double break where, he could have easily been in a situation where Djokovic is just one break down, possibly steals the third set, and it's a different match.
Yeah, I was gonna say thank God that was on an even game because if it was on an odd game and they had one more to play, that would have been absolutely ridiculous. A 40-minute two game would have been ridiculous. The only thing I actually noticed about that period of time was I thought Novak was coming in a lot and leaving the line wide open.
Hmm.
Which is fine, right? Like I think Carlos still has to make the line, but I felt like I noticed this happen very like not very often, but often enough where the only time Djokovic was getting passed was via line. And I think if it happened like one or two times, like that's fine. But I thought Novak might have like covered the line a little more in order uh to shut that off. But again, I don't know if I'm like picking at straws here or if I like genuinely saw something that was of value.
No, I think there's a legitimate point to that. I would almost attribute it more to a function of Djokovic's approach shots, though, where I thought he was kind of looping the forehand a little bit too casually, um, to Carlos's backhand, which obviously he's gonna just rip line.
100%. But it does show that the guy's game is built for all surfaces, right? Like it doesn't matter what he played. Like Novak himself said, uh, I'm surprised at how quickly he's adapted to grass, and I think this is only his fourth grass court tournament. So I don't know if we're seeing the new guard at Wimbledon, but yeah, it's incredibly impressive what he accomplished at 20 years old.
Going back to Wimbledon for a second here, I do. I think we owe it to the fans to give a couple stats first off. And the reason why I think we don't bet on tennis, right? Djokovic, Djokovic's last loss was 3,661 days before he lost to Carlos. He had won 45 straight matches on center court. To bet against him, and I don't care what algorithm IBM Watson arrived at to come up with the 51-49 comparison for favoring Alcaraz before the match, that it's just irresponsible, in my opinion, to place a bet when things are that razor sharp and close. And I mean, you're betting against the greatest player of all time. So what Carlos did to become the third Spaniard since Santana in '66 and Rafa to win Wimbledon is it's still taking me a while to kind of get over the emotional hangover of like watching that match, and we're like 36 hours out from it, but I think it was I mean yesterday I was just completely drained. I don't think my adrenaline has pumped that hard for years.
Yeah, I to 2 points on that. I saw UTR gave Carlos also, I think, a 51% chance to win that match, and I was like, dude, I sure he's playing well, but given what this guy has done on this court at this stage, there's no way you can say he's the favorite, even marginally. I mean, sure, fine, okay. At the end of the day, 51-49, it's a toss up, but like, yeah, you got to
I,
give Novak an edge.
yeah, I mean I disagree with that. He's
Yeah.
played like you said 4 tournaments on grass. You don't even have enough of a sample size to, you know, to make any statements statistically speaking.
Yeah, 100%. And I think hopefully this doesn't mean that when they go into the US Open that the both IBM and UTR will be like, oh yeah, Carlos now has like a 60% chance to win this match. Because at the end of the day, this is still like this is one win, right?
Yep.
And there's a lot more to go.
Yeah, and then another thing I wanted to point out, which again, maybe a bit of a controversial take here, is I think the reason why Carlos Alcaraz won Wimbledon is because he beat Arthur Rinderknecht in the first round of Queens, 7-6 in the third set. I think that's the domino right there. That's the first domino. Carlos is coming back from the French Open, first match back. He's low on confidence. He's unsure about his body physically. He is playing one of the most dangerous players on a grass court in the ex-college player Rinderknecht. Plays a tough match. Djokovic actually cited this match in the press conference. He
Really?
cited this match in the press conference as a critical match for Carlos to gain the experience on grass, gain those extra. I mean, when we're talking about small sample sizes for tournaments, that was an extra 5 matches. That's like 20% of his grass court experience that he
Yeah.
got because he beat Rinderknecht.
Yeah.
And then he went on to obviously win the tournament. But I also think there's a crazy stat there about like how no one has ever won Wimbledon after winning a tournament the week before or something like that. I know Federer has won Halle a bunch of times, but I
Yeah.
think that might be 2 weeks before.
Before. Yeah.
I think it's hard to replicate the Queens and Wimbledon win. I don't know if that's ever been done or it's happened very rarely.
Yeah, I think the player in recent memory who's been closest to that has been like Berrettini, because Berrettini won, I believe, two grass court tournaments the year he made to the finals.
Right.
So that's the person I think who's been closest to doing that in recent memory. But of course, Novak exposed the backhand, so he had no chance there.
Yeah. I That's where again going back to Nick's tweet, I just the Berrettini Djokovic match, I don't even know how you can give Berrettini a chance.
Yeah, it was. I mean, give him credit. Like he beating Zverev isn't easy to do, especially with. I mean, you talk about Carlos being low on confidence. Berrettini's like even lower on confidence, right? For how bad of a year he's had, and so I was surprised to see that Nick backed him on that one.
Yeah, just for head to head, 4-0 for Djokovic, 11-3 sets won, 84-52 on games won.
It's one.
I mean,
Uh,
that's domination.
yeah, that's light work. Um, cool, awesome. Any other points you had on Carlos Nova?
No, I feel like there's more, and it's going to come to me because
Yeah,
that was such an epic match, but
yeah.
that's all I've got for now. Can I just do one, unless you have something?
I did have something.
Go
It
for it.
wasn't a point. It wasn't a point, but like this maybe now that we're still riding the high from this final, rank these five finals. So we got Carlos Novak 2023. We got Fed Rafa 2007. We got Fed Rafa 2008. Novak Fed 2019 and Fed Roddick 2009.
Oh my
Rank these five finals
God.
from best to worst.
When you said '07, do you mean '09? I think that was
No, no,
or
no.
'08.
I wanted so I want '07. That's the year Fed beat Rafa in seven in 5 sets, and then
Uh-huh.
'08. I
'08
think
was the 9-7 in the fifth.
yeah, the
Yep.
that's the one that Rafa beat Fed, I
Right.
believe.
Greatest
Like
match
yeah,
of all time.
yeah,
I
exactly.
think, yeah, I think I'm gonna have to start with that one. It just the tennis experts, right? Everyone
Yeah,
kind of calls that one the
yeah,
greatest match of all time. They were battling darkness.
yeah,
It was literally like almost pitch black at the end of the
yeah,
match. They still played some of the highest quality tennis that I've
yeah,
seen. I think the Carlos match was a little more up and down, right? Where we saw
yeah,
those couple of 6-1 sets, where in terms of just from a purist tennis standpoint, I don't think you can rate that higher.
yeah.
Um, so I would probably put the '08 Wimbledon Championships as number one. And then I'm surprised you didn't mention 2012 Australian Djokovic Nadal, because that might have actually been my number two.
Well,
Uh,
I was gonna go just exclusively Wimbledon matches,
got you,
not
got
yeah,
you.
yeah, yeah.
Um, Being a Roddick fan, I actually will put Roddick as number two.
Number two,
Also, just the fifth set score. I
yeah,
mean, 16-14,
yeah,
Roddick's closest chance to breaking the One Slam Wonder title. And I mean, he was right there. It was just a brilliant grass court display. Changed his strategy. I mean, he did everything that he possibly could. And it was one of those matches where I think I was crying for sure after.
minor point on that second set, if you'll remember, tie break. Roddick's up 6-2 or 6-3 in that breaker. And that's,
Brutal.
yeah, he goes up 2 sets to love. And yeah,
It's a
we
wrap.
know it's a wrap, but margins, razor thin at Wimbledon.
Yep. Yep. And didn't Federer hit some crazy like backhand line passing
Yeah,
shot on one of those
yeah,
set points?
yeah, he did. He did. He played what he needed to do. He played really, really well. And I don't think Roddick played all that spectacular because he still had, I mean, he had serves to win the tiebreak and he still wasn't able to.
And then let me check on the other two. I'm kind of forgetting the 2007 final. If I see
That
the
was
score, I'll kind of remember
6-2 for Federer in the fifth set, if I'm
in the
not
fifth.
mistaken. Yeah, if I'm not mistaken.
I vaguely remember. I don't remember, to be
This
fully
one,
honest,
honestly, okay.
this one or the 19 as much. I kind of
Yeah,
black out matches where Nadal lost for my memory.
completely fair. My start is similar to yours. I'll go Fed, Rafa '08 as number one. I'll go Novak Fed 2019 as my number two because of the fact that this was Fed coming back after his win in 2017, as well as the fact that Novak saved match points and it was all around just a really high quality match. So I'll say that is number two. I'll go Fed Roddick as number three because of the score, because of the fact that Roddick played so well, and because of the fact that Fed had to save set points in that second set to win. And then I'll go Carlos Novak 2023 as number four and Fed Rafa to '07 as uh the fifth match. And obviously, where the differences here are minute, but I think yeah, I still haven't seen a better match and better highlights than Fed Rafa '08.
Yeah, that match was, I mean, something else, right? It
Yeah,
immediately became a classic,
yeah,
greatest match of all time.
yeah. And one of the few matches that I could probably rewatch now from like start to finish, uh, even even though it's been like 15, 16 years.
100%. I think we may have to make this a segment from now on, like the best
Yeah,
of five
yeah.
tennis channel segment, which I wish they
Segment
brought back.
facts.
It used to be such a good show.
Yeah, they had Tennis Channel did a really good job, but with their segments, they always had really like good ones. I think the thing that I remember most about Tennis Channel is the freaking bag check. I used to love doing the bag check when they would go on random players and see what they have. But yeah,
They got to bring
unfortunately,
all that stuff back. That
yeah,
content that just fills the time was
yeah.
so good. I mean,
But alas, YouTube TV took off Tennis Channel from their subscription. So what an L.
let's not open the box again of the streaming services
Yep.
screwing us over.
Cool. Any closing thoughts on Wimbledon in this fortnight?
No, I mean it it proved to be what we thought it would be, which was the
Yeah,
greatest fortnight of the year. And
yeah,
it's going to be, I don't know how the rest of the, tennis is going to match up to this for the rest of the year because this was just, I mean, for me, it was the peak.
100%. I think our listeners can probably tell to some extent that we're in a little bit of awe for what happened yesterday and what this signifies in terms of the changing of the guard and what Carlos has done after bouncing back from cramps and losing in the semifinals. So
I,
one final,
I,
yeah, go for it.
yeah, I actually have another question for you.
Yeah,
Do you think that this upset ranks as closely as like a Soderling beating a Nadal in the French, or do you think this is a different type of upset where, that was obviously just like unexpected,
yeah.
and it was a 50-50 match, but to win in that circumstance felt like it's noteworthy when you think of like a top five or top 10 upset list. And then you bring in the stats that I mentioned around 45 center court wins in a row, 3,661 days since last loss.
Yeah. No, I think it's 100% like a different type of upset because of like the Soderling Nadal match. If I'm not mistaken, Nadal was struggling with injuries leading up to that point, right? But Carlos, like I think this is more significant because Novak had just beaten Carlos. Yes, he had just beaten Carlos on a different surface, but at the end of the day, everyone like we all thought Novak would win, right? And for Carlos
Right.
to win, to beat Novak on his surface in center court on his fourth grass court tournament, I think it's a different type of upset.
Yeah. And I mean, it's tough to call an upset where the number one player beats the
Yeah,
number two
number
player in
two,
the
yeah,
world, right? The
yeah,
greatest player of all time loses to the best player of the year. So
yeah,
to me, it was just I think when I think of upsets, I will still always remember this match because if I were a betting man, I
yeah,
mean, it's just so hard to bet against Novak.
yeah. And I think that's why I still think no matter what happens, I still will back Novak as a favorite for the U.S. Open.
Yep, yep.
He's Novak motivated. Come on, we saw what happened in Australia, and it didn't really matter, right? So I'm gonna back Novak on that one.
Yep. And then maybe to end on a light note, I do want to call out some shitheads of the week, and
Oh yeah,
unsurprisingly, they're kind of our usual two, actually. I think
oh
I think
yeah,
these folks get I hope they're good sports because I think
yeah.
they get a disproportionate amount of shit from us, but
Okay,
I saw a video of people interviewing players, just a quick snapshots of like what if you had a Wimbledon playlist, like what's the song you'd put on? And Stefanos Tsitsipas and Felix Auger-Aliassime said, and I'm not even joking you, Watermelon Sugar and Let It Be, respectively, as their top songs for a Wimbledon playlist. Which is just I mean, dude, if if my respect was low, it just hit rock bottom. Like Felix, okay, that's like such a Canadian thing to do is like a chill song.
yeah.
But Watermelon Sugar is just like sus.
So okay, so I do agree with you that before Wimbledon, I'm not listening to Watermelon Sugar when I'm trying to like dominate Murray and Dominic Thiem and whoever I'm trying to play. Watermelon Sugar is a banger in and of itself, but
I don't know, man.
outside of the tennis court, I agree with you though. If prior to Wimbledon, I'm not listening to Watermelon Sugar, and that's not the first thing that's I would say is like on my playlist. So that's actually really funny you brought that up.
Yeah, it was I like couldn't believe what I saw. And then meanwhile you've got like interestingly UK rap making a huge
Oh, nice.
surge, right, among
Yeah.
most of the American players. Nick Kyrgios called out Dave for Screwface forgetting the name of the song Screwface Capital or something like that from a
Yeah.
2019 album, which is just I ended up listening to it and I was like, dude, this is like my new favorite song.
Song. Nice. Yeah. Well, I actually haven't listened to it, so I'll have to take a gander. Were there, do you see any other songs in the playlist that were like good or like
Yeah, I mean Taylor Fritz and Ben Shelton both put like some Central C Dave songs on, like UK Rap and Sprinter. So I
okay,
thought that was interesting that like we're seeing this shift to go more culturally, right?
cultural.
Like
Yeah,
to the UK, and it's Wimbledon too, right? So they're kind of getting in their zone.
nice. All right, so maybe we'll end up on the final question. On the final question, what's your go-to song for, or what's your walkout song at Wimbledon?
Walkout song.
Yeah.
Damn, you're putting me on the spot here. I feel like I need to open my Spotify up and
You need it. All right. How about I go first then? I'll probably go with "In Paris" by Kanye. Jay-Z had to blur about the first bit, but I mean that I think that song goes unreal hard. And I mean, if you've seen like LeBron, like that being played before the Miami Heat games when LeBron was there, like yeah, that at Wimbledon would go unbelievably hard.
that is a good pick. You know, I might have to go with Tequila Shots, Kid Cudi.
Nice.
I feel like that song, I remember playing it in the car for with a few of my buddies, and it just it just absolutely slaps. I mean, if
Slaps.
you've got good speakers and you can hear all the layers,
Yeah.
uh, it goes pretty hard.
Steph, I hope you're listening to this because before Wimbledon, watermelon sugar, I'll disagree. I think it's a banger, but not something I would listen to prior to Wimbledon. So
And I just don't think it's a banger. So I think if you're listening to Harry Styles as a guy, I, I don't know. I think there are contexts in which it is appropriate that include girls, but I think if you're listening to it on your own, I mean, you're just like a certified lover boy right there.
And on that note, fellas, we'll catch you next time on the next episode of Real Takes Tennis. Call those lines in.
Peace.